How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm very, very pleased with it. It's a big honor.
How did you feel when you found out?
I felt very, it really made me feel proud and elevated me. Like it's a very special, it's one thing to be recognized in, let's say, the WWE Hall of Fame and be recognized by your peers and your fellow wrestlers and stuff like that. That's one thing. But it's another thing to be recognized by your country and, your fans across the country and how much of an impact you had on their lives and how, I think it's over 20 years later now that I, my career's been over. You always say once you're off TV and wrestling, they forget about you. And, it's always amazed me is that, I've never been forgotten at all. And people still remember me and, compare me. I think in a lot of ways, if I look back on my career, it's other wrestlers that have faded, like Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan and stuff. They've faded more from people's minds, whereas I still stand out. People still remember my performances and my matches and the way I wrestled and how much realism and how much I put into my matches and just what set me apart from maybe every wrestler. I believe I was a very special, one-of-a-kind wrestler that changed the direction of wrestling and made wrestling about wrestling, not about how big my arms were and how tall I was or what kind of physique I had. It was more about I was a wrestler's wrestler. The fans loved me for being the wrestler that I was, that could go against anybody. Bret Hart could wrestle Andre the Giant and maybe beat him and it would be believable. And there was just something about the way I developed as a wrestler, my whole life with wrestling and, the career I had. It's all very Cinderella-like.
I want to go through some of that career with you today, Bret. Before we do, and I want to go through some of the matches that sort of that made you you. But before we do, another thing, as a Canadian fan of yours, you were always Canadian. You were always Canadian on TV. You were always very proudly Canadian when you were introduced in your wrestling persona. How important was that to you?
Oh, it was always important. I mean, I do remember when I first went there, they were like, "Where do you want to be from?" And I was like, "What do you mean? I'm from Calgary." And it's like, "We're going to bill you from the States. Like, pick a city and like Bret Hart can be from Los Angeles or Detroit or somewhere." I can remember it was like, I said, "I just want to be from Canada." Like my dad said, my whole history's there. And it was like, okay, like you're lost, you're going to be Canadian, which won't get you so far. But I don't think at that time, nobody thought much of me anyway. And it was kind of like, then nobody saw anything from me back in those days. I went, from being a big fish in my dad's little pond Stampede Wrestling to being a little tiny fish in a huge pond in WWE in 1984 when I started there. And I don't think there was any, if there was a wrestler that you ever said for sure he'll never amount to anything, I was one of those kind of guys. Nobody saw any big future for me there. And, I was just determined to make it down there. And, the truth is that I had a great education wrestling, really all my life. And even in working for my father at Stampede Wrestling, I was his top guy. I wrestled world champion wrestlers. I'd wrestled all over the world in the 6 years that I first started. I wrestled all over, like in Japan. I wrestled in Germany. I wrestled in England. I wrestled in New Zealand. I did a lot of wrestling all around the world. And I learned a lot of different styles. Calgary was a beautiful place to learn wrestling because it was kind of the territory where old timers finished up their career because they couldn't get booked anywhere anymore. And it was also the place for young rookies to start. So we had this great cross section of wrestlers that were old and young. Plus we had, because of the US dollar at the time, my dad ended up having to sort of, scour the earth to find wrestlers that could come in for him. So we ended up with wrestlers from New Zealand and Puerto Rico and Germany and different places. and I had a great style that said I was really different, always different than the American guys that were at my age in WWF when I first went there. I was a different breed of cat. Had a different style, had a different way of doing things. And all that made a big difference to the fans watching me. I think the key to my success in my career was turning into a bad guy, which allowed me to establish that I was a good wrestler from the start.
Yeah, but when you were a bad guy, the Canadian fans kept cheering for you as if you were a face, as if you were a good guy.
Well, I mean, later on when I did the whole Canada-US thing, but it took many years to build up. When I became world champion, which is in 1992, I was really the guy that had to pull the sword out of the stone. And I had to be the guy to maybe move on past Hulk Hogan and move into a different era of wrestling. It's like people always go, he's never going to be the Hulk Hogan of wrestling. And, it's a step in the wrong direction. And you can say whatever you want today, but I end up being the guy that changed wrestling. It wasn't about how big you were and how big your arms were anymore. It was about how good your match was. And I was a storyteller.
We have a clip. We have that clip. This is from 1992 in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Just take a listen to this.
Now he's going for the sharpshooter. And just look at this. Flair's getting up. And he's trying to detract the referee, but he didn't. Oh, he gave up. We've seen history made. Let's get the official word. Pandemonium here in Saskatoon. Bret the Hitman Hart just gained the World Wrestling Federation Championship.
It's Pandemonium in Saskatoon from 1992. That is my guest, professional wrestling legend, WWE Hall of Famer, and now Canada Walk of Famer, Bret Hart, winning his first WWE Heavyweight Championship over Ric Flair. What goes to your mind when you hear that?
Well, actually, as soon as I hear Saskatoon, I realize that I remember and I can reflect back that was my first match I ever had was in Saskatoon.
Really?
In front of about 100 fans. And it was so, it didn't, Saskatoon was kind of the start of like a career that really didn't look that promising. And when I look back and like when I walked out and with my white skin and my new wrestling boots and my wrestling trunks in those days, and I think about how nervous I was and how far I was from being that guy that you just watched. But there's something very beautiful about that, about how I slowly evolved into that character. And then once that crowning moment right there where I became champion, that set me apart. That gave me a confidence and a believability in myself. Like I believed in myself and, I just went above and beyond as much as possible to live up to that moment and to be that champion and to always deliver those kind of matches. And I know I worked really hard at it. And I think that's why I feel like that's why I'm remembered today.
Talk to me more about that because, winning, for those who don't know, winning the WWE Championship is far more than just a storyline, especially when you won it. The WWE had this huge success with Hulk Hogan. They tried to replicate that success with the Ultimate Warrior. That didn't work out. They needed to figure out who the next star was going to be. You win the WWE Heavyweight Championship. It's kind of placed on you. What did that mean to you in that moment?
Well, it was even more than that. It was the trouble. The company had run into a bunch of varying scandals. One was that Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan had been shipping steroids to each other at their home and flying steroids in the air, which I guess is illegal from state to state. And anyway, it became a big black eye with steroids and wrestling and Vince McMahon, supposedly selling steroids and things like that to the wrestlers, which never happened. But there was a scandal, and the company took a huge hit. There was also a sex scandal with the ring crew, with one of the management guys in WWE, which was another big headline. And there was just became this series of bad headlines for wrestling. And Hulk Hogan, I think because he was a little bit embarrassed of how much of a fallout came from him, sort of in his steroids, like, eat your vitamins and say your prayers and all that stuff, sort of bit him right on the ass. And so he disappeared, and the company was really sinking fast. And they tried Warrior, they end up with Macho Man, they end up with Ric Flair, but nobody was really turning things around, and things were getting worse. They're losing all these toy deals and big, things within the promotion that I was really unaware of. And I was like the guy that pulled the sword out of the stone. I was like, try Bret Hart. The fans love him. He had this great match in Wembley with Bulldog a few weeks ago. See if he can do the trick. And Vince McMahon, I think, worried that he might end up actually going to jail over all that stuff. Decided that he needed to put the title on somebody that was a safe, secure bet, that wouldn't drop the ball, wouldn't mess up, wouldn't have no scandals, and impaired driving or anything could set the company back huge if it was the wrong guy. And he chose me, and I turned out to be a good hero for him and a good hero for the wrestling industry. And I took wrestling in a different direction. I think when you look back today, they don't wrestle like Hulk Hogan anymore. They wrestle like Bret Hart.
Yeah.
Wrestling's all about action and speed and telling the story. And I think that's where I came in.
Can we talk about storytelling a little bit? Because, for people who are listening to this who are not like big nerdy fans like me, you are so well known for your storytelling in ring. And I think for people who aren't as familiar with the craft of professional wrestling, they may not know what we're talking about there. So before we talk about, I want to play a clip from one of the best storytelling moments of your career. But before we do, can you talk to me a little bit about storytelling through wrestling?
Well, I'll just say this is that in wrestling, people assume that, there's maybe a bunch of people that put together a match, like even the two wrestlers that they sit for hours and work out all these different moves. And, that's not how it works, or at least not in my time. When it was my day, you sat down, usually the guy, you get your orders from someone within the promotion. It's like, you're losing and he's going to beat you in a bear hug. We need 15 minutes. And then then he'd walk out, and the two wrestlers sit there and kind of map out a 15-minute kind of like, how about if I do this, or we'll start out with this, or I got an idea, or you have two or three little small ideas that are going to be incorporated into the match. And then you go out and you do what you're supposed to do. And in my case, I was always always more detailed. And I became a guy that eventually was in charge of all my matches. I get the ending. Vince McMahon would tell me what they want me to do. And now I'm going to tell you how the story's going to go till we get to the ending. And I would map out the match with everybody, and to be quite intricate and quite a detailed match, to the point that, before I was ever champion, most wrestlers would sit down and go to me, what are we doing? And I would tell them what we're doing. And I was a guy that was, even with Vince McMahon, when I think of wrestling the British Bulldog at Wembley Stadium, I remember telling Vince, I said, do you want me to tell you the ending? And he goes, don't tell me the ending. I want to watch it.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, that's what I was. I was a guy that was the stunt coordinator, the director, the stage manager. I put the whole thing together. How it started, how we look at each other. When this happens, then you get up and you come up to me and you do this, or all the little details. I was, I think it goes back to what I said. I was this wrestling fan, a kid that grew up watching wrestling for so many years. And I was always about, like, if I was watching in the front row, this is what I think we should do. Like, if I was that little kid, how would I get that little kid in me that get my attention in a match? And then I would look at what the character was and what the style of that wrestler was, and go, this is what I would see. This is what we should do. And you should do this. And then I should do that. And then And it would just make so much sense to the wrestlers I worked with that most of the wrestlers would just sit back and tell me, like, I'll just do whatever you tell me to do. Yeah. And that's when I started to stand out, is because I was always a guy that tell better stories than anyone else.
I want to play maybe the best storytelling in the history of wrestling was through this match.
Stone Cold, if he gave up here. The ball coming from the forehead of Stone Cold Steve Austin.
From WrestleMania 13, what some consider to be the greatest match of all time, my guest, Canadian Walk of Fame recipient Bret Hart defeating Stone Cold Steve Austin. If you don't know this match, it's regarded as the best for a couple of reasons. One, it's two wrestlers at the absolute peak of their powers, and also it's a story that, and I don't know how to put this in any other term than like, it's almost like Dickensian. Like, it's such an incredibly challenging thing to do in terms of storytelling. It's called the greatest double turn in history. Bret, can you tell us what a double turn is and how you did it?
Well, I'll tell you, it was very, very unheard of. Like, what we were trying to do was maybe never tried before, quite the way we were doing it. We had somebody that was the sort of the meanest bad guy in the company, that was becoming so popular because he was such a good bad guy that his momentum was starting to shift, that the fans were starting to cheer for him. And you can sort of see that, how that's happening. And at the same time, I'm this hero and this wrestler, and the hero that I was, that's been a hero for too many years now, or at least that's the way it was interpreted. And I'm going to slowly evolve into a bad guy. And we're going to basically, within this one match, we're going to switch places. And it's hard to explain to someone. Like, I'm going to walk out and people are going to cheer and the roof's going to come off and everyone's going to love me and they want me to thrash this guy. And I'm mad at this guy too because of everything he's done to me. And he's the bad guy and everyone hates him. And by the end of it, they're going to hate me and loathe me and boo me out of the building, even though I didn't do anything wrong other than thrash this guy. And the bad guy is going to be the hero. So
just again, say that again, double turn, meaning he came in as the bad guy, you went in as the hero. Through the storytelling, solely the storytelling in the ring, you leave the bad guy and Stone Cold leaves the hero.
Right.
Man.
That's exactly it. And it's done in such a it's such a beautiful match, really. I mean, I can't say it was one of the easiest, most fun matches I ever had. Which, if you watch it, you go, geez, it is one of the most violent, intense, almost. It's a very serious match, and it was so much fun for me to play the part. And Steve Austin was in his prime, and like you said, I was in my prime, and it just, I would say in thinking of that match that there's nothing in there that you would want to take out. Like, every move is so intense and powerful. Like, one movie adds to the next move, and it's like this constant building of the story and the shifting of, where a good guy can go too far and the bad guy, it's like cheering for the shark in Jaws. It's like, it's just not going to happen. But by the end of the movie, you're cheering for the shark, and the shark doesn't quite pull it off and becomes a hero.
Did you know it when you went back to the locker room? Did you know that you had done something special?
Yeah, I did. I knew. I could read it. I could tell. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Steve Austin, who's a great wrestler, but I think that match is a Bret Hart match. That's me sitting down telling Steve Austin what we're going to do, and him just agreeing with me and saying, "Okay, I love it. I love the story you're telling. I love the story the way I'm envisioning it, the way you're talking it through." And it's like, okay, well, that's exactly what we're going to do, and this is what the story's going to be. And you're going to be surprised at the end, but the fans are going to love you and they're going to hate me. And it was just someone that knows how to read an audience before you get there, It's funny when I think about that day. I remember Steve Austin and I showing up at, he had to be there by noon or so. And we went out and sat on the ring apron. Both of us are kind of like, what are we going to do? We just wrestled a few months before in a big match. Mm-hmm. And we kind of, at the time, thought we used up everything. We didn't have anything. Like, why are we wrestling again now? Like we've kind of spent everything that we had. And the match was what they called a no quit or an I quit match, where one of us had to give up. There's no pinfalls, which is a big hindrance because you need pinfalls to have a good match. Yeah. And so we take out one of the main ingredients to having a great match. We take out pinfalls so that they're irrelevant. They don't mean anything.
Pinfalls, I should say, meaning that 1, 2, 3, like pinning somebody, counting 1, 2, 3, and then it's over. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't mean anything. It's who gives up.
Yeah.
It's and who surrenders.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of less moves you can do that mean anything. You have to put holds and things like that on. It's a little different kind of psychology to it, but it's limiting. And we were both kind of like not sure how this match was going to be very good. And I remember kind of just laying out to Steve how I saw the match going. And I related it to a school fight. And I remember telling Steve, I said, it's like two guys at school having a fight after school. And you're the badass guy that came into my school. And now it's like everyone's been building it to this moment that we're going to fight after school. And I'm the hero and you're the bad guy. And this is how it's going to shift. Because I can remember a school fight when I was a kid where the guys fought and everyone thought one guy was going to win and another guy was going to lose. And in the end, it was the other way around. And the guy that won became the bad guy. Like people didn't like him because he won, and they felt sorry for the bad guy in the school fight. Oh, wow. They felt sorry for him for losing. And I just kind of remember relating the same kind of psychology to Steve, and we, just kind of pieced this one match together with things that we could do that would constantly be things he would do to me that would keep him, because he wanted to stay a bad guy for quite a few more months. It wasn't supposed to be overnight, but I could feel the audience going with Steve Austin more and more every week. And I could, like, whether he realized it or not, it's like, you're going to be a hero soon anyway, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah.
But it was just a masterful story in the sense that I think, and I say this to a lot of people that watch UFC, for example. I say, you watch UFC and watch guys break arms, punch each other in the face till they're pulps and stuff like that, like what you see in UFC. But what you're watching when you watch Bret Hart and Steve Austin WrestleMania 13 is everything that you get in that match with a UFC fight. But no animals are actually harmed in the making of my movie. Like there's nobody going to get really hurt for real.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful, violent, I would say for someone that's never watched a wrestling match or never watched one of my matches, to watch that match, it's a masterful match. And there's not one wasted move in it.
I agree. Yeah. If you haven't seen it, pop that in your Google machine and check it out. What are you most proud of when you look back at your in-ring work? Is it your safety? Is it how you had these bloody, destructive matches, but everyone was safe?
That and the sort of the, I was a big fan and I wanted to entertain the fans that came to see me, and I want to give them, I was always trying to deliver the kind of matches that I thought a wrestling fan would really want to see, that set me apart from other wrestlers. Like I just always tried to make my matches as real as possible. And a lot of times I would sit with my opponent and put a match together and kind of like, what would be believable of me and you wrestling each other? Like, how would people see it? You're 6'5" and I'm 6 foot tall. So you would do this, or I would do that. And it would, we get where the wrestler I would sit with would start to visualize how I see the match going and start to go, yeah, you're right. That would be perfect. And it was like, and then you piece this story together. I did that every night for 23 years. Whether I was in Japan or wherever, it's always like, how would this, I always sold my wrestling as real. Like I want people to, when they drove home, go, I know about the first match wasn't real for sure, and the third one was fake, and the fifth one was fake, but that second one with Bret Hart was totally real.
Yeah.
And that's what I always try to do. And, when I watch wrestling and I think of, like, I don't know how many listeners are familiar with things I did in the ring, but the front turnbuckle, me being thrown in by another wrestler into the front turnbuckle. When you watch it and I hit that front turnbuckle and you can hear the metal hit the metal at the click of the turnbuckle pad and all that. And then I bounce all the way out to the middle of the ring and I'm like almost dead to the world kind of thing. It's like people go, that was real. Like there's no way you could fake that. There's no way you could plan that or time that. And it's not fake. It's a very hard physical thing to do, to run into a front turnbuckle, run in frontwards and hit it as hard as you can and bounce out. And just everything I did was when I look at that kind of stuff, I go, that's what I was always trying to do, is make people believe that, oh, this one is real. I don't know about the other matches on the card, but this one is real.
It's real though, Bret, and it's I think we now more than ever know just how real it is. It's physically demanding wrestling. The travel is grueling. Wrestlers often develop addictions to painkillers, other substances. Wrestlers you've worked with have died at relatively young ages. Looking back at it, why do you think you were able to last for so long in the business?
I think maybe that's a little of my dad in me. I think I was always a solid, well-built, well-constructed human being that was physically able to do all that stuff genetically. And like I said, I grew up as a kid fan watching wrestling and sort of studying it all my life, whether I ever understood that I was going to become a pro wrestler someday. But I understood wrestling, I think, almost from the start. Like I knew how I thought it should go. And, I think I was just always, I take a lot of pride in knowing that I was so safe. I mean, I really was so safe. Like you could trust me. If I said I could do something, like we don't get credit a lot of times, wrestlers, for being the great athletes that we are.
Yeah.
But, to pick a man up, a 300 or 200, 300 pound man, just body slam him in the middle of the ring and then walk out and climb up the apron and climb up on the turnbuckle. And as you're climbing up, that opponent that you're wrestling, you just got to lie there and go, I can't move. I have to stay right here until Bret Hart jumps off. He's going to land on me with a knee or whatever it is that you're doing. And he has to put all his trust in me that I'm not going to hurt him, that I'm never going to fall on him funny or land on his face or his head or his neck. Or it's so much trust involved in two wrestlers working with each other. And for me to climb up on that top turnbuckle for 23 years and jump off and land on that guy halfway across the ring with an elbow or a leg drop or whatever it is that I'm doing, and know that I cannot land on that guy and hurt him. I can't injure him ever, because that would break the code of trust. And, it's like, there's no backup plan for a wrestler when he gets hurt. And I'm living proof of that. Like once you get hurt, your career's over and your income comes to an end, and you're just a liability after you get hurt. So everything in wrestling is about trusting the guy you're working with. Like, don't hurt me. You have to protect me. And I was a guy that when I got taught and when I first started, it was all about protecting the guy I worked with, making sure you could hurt yourself. You could blow your own knee out, but don't you ever blow out the guy never can't hurt the guy you're working with, because that's goes against the code kind of thing. And I always took that code really serious, because when I worked for my dad, I couldn't injure one of my dad's top guys, because then it would affect his business, and it has a trickle effect down to everybody. So you have to protect the guys you're working with. And then it was like, just through my career, like if you injured somebody, you'd hear about somebody, you hear about so-and-so, he got hurt, he blew his, broke his shoulder in the ring or whatever it is. And sometimes you never see that wrestler again. They just that's it. They get pushed out to the outside. They get pushed out of the business kind of thing. And it's like, there's no room for guys that get hurt. But at the same time, I'm not going to be a guy that's going to hurt guys ever. And that's the one thing I take the most pride in, is that I wrestled for 23 years, and I never injured one wrestler ever in any way where he couldn't wrestle the next night. And you would know from watching my matches that they're very physical matches where you go, oh, that had to hurt. This, you had to hurt him on that. It's like, no, it's like, it's really close. It's, you're making full contact with wrestlers, but you're just not hurting them. It's hard to explain how much of an art that is, but it's an art.
Yeah. I mean, that's fully why you're on this art show, is because of the art of what you do. And wrestling has given so much to you, Bret, but it's also taken so much from you. I mean, very famously, your brother Owen died in an accident. Your brothers-in-law, Davey Boy Smith and Jim Neidhart, both died before their time. Many friends and old colleagues have passed. What do I want to ask here? Like, how were you able to reckon with that sort of loss while still pushing forward yourself?
Well, it's like, there's all these pitfalls in life, and you never know what's going to bring you down. And there's things that I was just lucky and fortunate that I never end up with any kind of drug dependency or alcohol problem or a pill problem, or like there's a lot of wrestlers that took pain pills and took them, I think, relatively innocent. Like like I'm only taking one, and there's always a supposed injury that they had, but I know from my own experience, because I had my share of injuries, but I knew that I never wanted to be dependent on those kind of things. So I stayed away from those things. It's just really just a personal decision.
Yeah.
But I was never a guy that relied on medications to get me through my job. Like if my job was that bad and everything hurt that badly, I would just stop doing it. But I worked as hard as anybody. I had as many injuries as anybody, but I stayed away from those things. And it was just always, you got to moderate your poisons kind of thing. Like you have to make sure you don't, let something derail you, like alcohol problem or, I just was always very concerned. I think once I became a champion in wrestling, like that Saskatoon moment where you were talking about a few minutes ago, I was so proud of myself, and I made my mom and dad so proud. And it was such a big moment for me, for real. Like it wasn't just pretend. I mean, it was like a lifetime of in a lot of ways, a lifetime of striking out until then kind of thing. And now I am somebody that proved something. I was never going to let myself down or my fans down by failing them in some way. And as far as the addictions, like the pill problems that, probably had a lot to do with the deaths of the British Bulldog and Jim the Anvil and whatnot. And so many of my wrestling peers that are no longer here. I think it was all a miscalculation for most of them. It was like they always thought they had some kind of, high tolerance or, I can do this because I'm 300 pounds and I don't need to worry about it. Or this is how many I usually take. Or they were always wrong. It was always like, how many wrestlers were wrong from taking too much pain medication and becoming too reliant on it. And watching what happened with my brother-in-law, the British Bulldog, was really sad to see him go down the way he did. And, it became some people were more vulnerable to that than others. And he was one of those guys that was just very vulnerable to that. And it brought him down and he could never get off. And it proved to be his demise. And that's happened to quite a few. But I don't think of myself as better than them necessarily, just that I was more careful and just, I was a guy that just made a point of not, I think probably the biggest factor would be my father. I became the light in his life and made him so proud, and my mom and my dad so happy with all the successes that I had and how I was, brought, so much pride to the family and that I could never let them down. I could never let my dad down. And that was part of what drove me.
Bret, before we go, I mean, I've been waiting sort of the entire interview to talk to you about this because I've tried to hold it in. Is that like I was born in 87, and so I was 7 years old in 94. There was no bigger hero to me than Bret the Hitman Hart. You were I had the glasses, I had the shirt. I went to see you every time you came to St. John's, Newfoundland. You guys didn't come very often, but whenever you did, we all would flock down there to see you, man. Like, you gave me so much as a kid, man, and thank you for it.
Thank you for watching me. I always say I tried my best to be a good hero all the time. And even when I was a bad guy with the U.S. bashing and all that stuff.
We were still cheering for you.
I made Canadians proud. I do remember a specific match, a flag match we had in Halifax where we cheated so bad and we got cheered at the end by all the Canadian fans, which was such a shock to the American fans. Like they're watching it about ready to throw the beer bottle through the TV set. It's like, but I just remember it was so much fun being a bad guy and being a good bad guy. And we were all bad guys. And Owen and Pillman and everybody in Neidhart, I think all 5 of us were in that match. And it was just a great memory for me. And it was kind of like a chance for Canadians to, to give it to the Americans. And the Canadians kind of got behind the role. It's like, you know what, we're going to be bad guys with Bret Hart cheering him on. And it kind of took on a whole different, I don't think Vince McMahon or anybody saw how big that me being a Canadian guy bashing Americans, how that would make me such a bad guy in America, but it also made me loved in Canada. And that was part of a very magical time for me. I would never change anything about those days. So
before we go, and I'm getting the wrap, but I'm going to do this anyway. I was wondering if we could do a quick rapid fire thing with you. You only have to give 1 word or 2 for an answer. Are you good to do that?
Okay.
All right.
Ready to go. Yeah.
Favorite wrestler to work with?
Mr. Perfect.
Favorite move that isn't the sharpshooter?
Probably my front turnbuckle.
Favorite Canadian wrestler other than yourself?
My brother Owen.
Best wrestler overall other than yourself?
CM Punk.
Really? Wow. Favorite foreign object?
The bell.
Better rivalry, Shawn Michaels or Stone Cold Steve Austin?
Geez, that's a dead tie. I would say Steve Austin by a hair.
Better arena to wrestle in, Madison Square Garden or the Saddle Dome?
Madison Square Garden.
Really? All right. Maybe we're going to edit that one out for Canada.
Well, Calgary was a quiet crowd. Like they were always kind of quiet and studious, which was great.
Yeah.
And they studied me and they were big fans of mine too. But in Madison Square Garden, they were really long time educated fans. So they had they just loved a good wrestler. And probably the best arena in the world for me was Madison Square Garden for sure.
Your favorite win ever?
The first title win at Saskatoon. Has to be my favorite moment.
Your favorite loss ever?
The Iron Man match with Shawn Michaels.
Really? Interesting. Bret, congratulations on Canada's Walk of Fame. I know that your brother and your father and your mother and everybody's going to be on your mind as you accept that award.
Well, I'm very proud of it. I'm proud. It's a proud moment for me, and I'm sure they'll be looking down from the heavens and being proud too.
Bret, thanks for being with us today.
All right, my pleasure.
I'm speaking with the excellence of execution, Bret Hitman Hart, thus fulfilling my destiny when I was 5 years old. I think I can retire now. He is one of the latest inductees into the Canadian Walk of Fame.